Now, I'm a kelp forest ecologist, so I knew I would not see any algae like the giant kelp here in Southern California. But if you look carefully, there were seaweeds to see on the coral reefs, including both greens and reds. Also keep in mind that corals incorporate tiny photosynthetic algae known as zooxanthellae in their tissues. However, it is not good when you see algae growing over the coral or on gorgonians like this. Fortunately, I only observed a few examples, unlike what I've seen in some parts of the Caribbean. Surprisingly, I saw very few invertebrates and not a single nudibranch on the entire trip, quite different from the nearby Philippines, where nudies are all the rage. Oh wait, I am a marine biologist, so I should know that the cnidarians, which were common everywhere, are invertebrates too. These include the stony or hard corals, soft corals or gorgonians, hydroids, fire corals, and you can't forget the sea anemones. If there weren't any of them, where would the anemone fish live? I love the blue base on this one, and the red tentacles on another. I won't even attempt to identify all the hard or stony corals that dominate the reefs. These are table corals, here are brain coral, see the resemblance? This is a cup coral, I do know this one is staghorn, and I know these are lettuce coral. One thing that makes it difficult for me to identify the stony corals is that species in different families may adopt similar growth patterns like these table corals. Despite the number of divers who visit Palau, I did not detect much damage to the coral, and relatively little sign of disease like I've seen elsewhere in the tropics. Even when dead, coral rubble, no relation to Barney or Betty or Bam Bam, provides a habitat for a number of critters. The soft corals or gorgonians are a bit easier with many species of sea fans, a number of beautiful tree gorgonians, organ pipe corals, which do have hard skeletons, but are still considered to be softies, and various other species. With some named after vegetables, including the leek, cauliflower, and broccoli gorgonians. I was sure glad to see there were no asparagus gorgonians. And of course, you can't forget the golden jellyfish, or sea jellies, in Jellyfish Lake. It's just a short hike up and over the ridge. To this body of brackish water. Entry into the lake is from a large float. Don't worry, these sea jellies have stinging cells, but they don't generally penetrate human skin, unless you have really thin skin. These jellies actually incorporate algae in their tissues and get some of their nourishment from their photosynthetic activity. The jellyfish migrate both horizontally across the lake based on time of day and vertically. This is John, one of PDA's instructors, but he's not a sea jelly. I just wish I could process my video footage like I could these still images taken from it. In the Caribbean, large barrel and other sponges are dominant. But here in Palau, all I saw were much smaller species. Despite the lack of nudibranchs, mollusks were represented by several species. Oysters included the orange-mouthed thorny oyster, the honeycomb oyster, and the gold-lipped pearl oyster. A few giant clams were seen, you can easily detect the two giant siphons to facilitate water flow through the clam, bringing in both oxygenated water and food to filter out. I wondered about this shell in the channel. Was it poached for dinner? Speaking of which, The smaller ones could be seen live in restaurant tanks, and larger ones in souvenir shops. The smaller, boring giant clams were frequently seen embedded in the reef. Boring? I thought they were pretty interesting myself. Looks like someone, or something, had dinner for two right here. Worms included the common Christmas tree variety, as well as feather dusters, which reminded me I need to do spring cleaning when I get home. As I mentioned, the only crustaceans I saw in Palau were in the holding tanks at restaurants. Relatively few echinoderms were present. Starfish, or sea stars as the PC crowd calls them, were a rarity. I did see the granular sea star, and what I think is coming sea star, as well as the blue sea star, but in its beige color phase. I only saw the arms of this brittle star. Perhaps the most common representatives of the spiny-skinned phylum were the crinoids. They were frequently seen high up on gorgonians to capture food passing by in the currents. On the sandy bottoms, mostly in the channels, I did film a number of sea cucumbers, including the amberfish with its processed sand poop, the brown sandfish, the pineapple, possibly the leopard sea cucumber, there was also one black-spotted sea cucumber up on the reef itself. Most divers aren't familiar with the tunicates and salps, despite the fact they are your closest relatives in the invertebrate world. See the family resemblance? Species include the robust tunicate, green ern tunicate, and this unidentified pelagic salp. And we can't forget the invertebrates and algae and the plankton. They feed everything from small worms to huge manta rays.